Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections, along with the daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the prospects of artificial intelligence in India, the associated challenges, and the way forward. Then, in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the technology, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Then, in the prelims pointers section, we'll have a discussion with respect to 5 different articles from a special perspective of the upcoming UPSC prelims 2026, along with the value addition. So, stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to the AI revolution. Is India ready? We are living in a time where intelligence is not just exclusively limited to the humans. The intelligence is becoming artificial. Machines now have the capacity to think like humans, to respond like humans, to take decisions like humans do. And it is in that regard that we recently organized the India AI Impact Summit. And over there, coincidentally, we had a professor who acclaimed an Indian breakthrough, that is a robodog. But later it was found that it was of Chinese origin. And then she started defending herself, her institution, and in a very philosophical way, what she said was that your 6 can be my 9. Well, you can definitely rotate the numbers, rotate the events or things, but that doesn't change the reality. There are some serious questions which we need to ask ourselves. The very first question is, are we genuinely doing any kind of breakthrough as far as AI is concerned? Or we are just rebranding those products which are actually manufactured outside India? The second question which we'll have to ask is, are we a real participant in the global AI race? Or we are just sitting on the sidelines and applauding for the others? What you'll have to understand is that AI is the next frontier. And that is the reason we see the incorporation of AI in almost every domain. You talk about agriculture, you talk about medical sciences, you talk about e-commerce, you talk about space. It is omnipresent. And it is for that reason that we have very few countries, specifically China and the US, who are intensively doing research as far as AI is concerned. And they are coming up with their own large language models. We'll discuss what LLMs are all about. Large language models form the very core of artificial intelligence. And now we are actually focusing, and this article also talks about that. We are focusing on developing our own indigenous large language models. But there are loopholes, there are issues. So what we'll be doing today is we'll first talk about what artificial intelligence is all about. What are the varied applications of artificial intelligence? What are some of the very serious challenges with respect to the AI? And what should be the way forward? Believe me, it's one of the very important topics, especially with regard to GSV, science and technology. And what the article says is that in order to emerge as an AI hub, as an AI power, India needs to significantly invest in its capacities, right? Now, let's talk about with the very basics. Start with the very basics and talk about what do we mean by artificial intelligence. As the word says, artificial means not real. See, generally, the word intelligence is associated with humans. But when machines develop the ability to think like humans, to take decisions like humans do, we say that the machines have gained that particular intelligence, what we call as the artificial intelligence. So it's basically the simulation of human intelligence by the machines, which we call as artificial intelligence. But the question is how this flows, how this happens. See, there are 2 important things which I have to understand. The very first is algorithm. Algorithm hota kya hai? It is that series of steps which are followed by the computer. So you have basically a computer, a model, and then whatever steps it follows, that is what we call as algorithm, right? So you have a particular machine and you feed in data, right? You feed in data. And this particular machine then on the basis of series of steps, it performs certain tasks. Those series of steps are known as algorithms. Then there are computational models. See, we start with the very first as language model. These are simple computational techniques which basically predict. If I talk about a very simple language model, let's say if I'm typing in the WhatsApp, I'm messaging someone, or let's say I'm basically writing a mail, and I say that the sky is automatically there would be a word, maybe blue, the sky is blue, right? So there is a kind of predictive analysis which is involved, right? There is a kind of prediction of the words which are used in a sentence, right? And it is based on language models, which we generally have in our phones, the very basic aspect. Then we have the large language models. When these language models become very complex and advanced, we call them large language models. So, bhai, language models perform very simple tasks, but LLMs perform very complex tasks. And LLMs are based on deep learning architectures, what we generally call as transformers, right? In the scientific language, we call them transformers. So we have, you must have used the OpenAI's ChatGPT or Gemini, or we have the DeepMind, or we have Grok, or we have DeepSeek. All these are run on the basis of large language model. And the development of a large language model, it's a very intensive process, right? It involves a lot of parameters. You must have heard about, whenever we talk about LLMs, we talk about that it uses billions of parameters, 35 billion parameters. This article even talks about that. So it's a very intensive process, right? And LLMs require, once you are developing the large language model, they require one of the very important core component, the hardware, which is graphic processing unit. And we'll talk about that, GPUs, right? So what you'll have to understand is, let's again summarize that we have these machines and data is fed. The machine basically reads the data, analyzes the data, learns the data, right? And then recognizes certain patterns. On the basis of, what is the basis? The basis is a large language model, right? And on the basis of the patterns, the machine also learns new things and it improves its overall outcome. And that is how the artificial intelligence works, right? The core is the data with respect to the machines. And as I told you, there are two things which are involved. The LLMs basically are involved with two things. The very first is machine learning, where the machine develops the ability to think like humans. Predictive analysis, for example, right? Pattern recognition, speech recognition, text recognition, right? And once we have more advanced level of machine learning, we call it deep learning. Now, what you'll have to understand is deep learning is basically inspired from the way the brain works, right? The neural networks. You must have heard about the way in which the brain functions. It responds. Let's say there is a particular event which is taking place, and then all of a sudden there would be a stimulus, right? And then the brain would respond. That is how the neural network works. And the similar architecture is then basically copied in the machines, what we call as the artificial neural networks. And these perform some of the very complex, intricate tasks. That is what you'll have to understand. The ANNs, artificial neural network, and in a way, it is mimicking the human brain. Okay? So this is what the artificial intelligence is all about. Again, what you can summarize is that we give the data, understand that the data is the core of AI. The better quality data you have, the better response the machine would give, right? So data forms a very backbone, and then there are certain series of steps known as the algorithm, and there are certain computational models which are basically trained on the basis of GPUs, graphic processing units. And on the basis of these LLMs, you have the machine recognizing the patterns, doing the research, doing the reasoning, improving itself, and then giving you the result, right? Let's say you give a prompt to the ChatGPT to summarize or to give a particular essay, or to summarize a particular, let's say, a text, a paragraph. So that is how things work, right? Deep learning, predictive analytics, and cognitive computing. This is what machine learning is all about. Then you have the neural network, the way human functions, human brain functions, computer vision, speech recognition, and ultimately you have the response. This is the flow of artificial intelligence. Now, what are the applications? What are the varied applications of AI? See, as I told in the beginning, that AI has application in almost each and every domain. Currently, we are trying to apply AI in almost each and every domain, be it education, be it e-commerce, be it health, and all that. For example, let's talk about the healthcare. So in the healthcare, what we are trying to do is we are integrating AI so that we can have better models of drug discovery. We can have better drugs for a particular disease. Or for example, in terms of the better diagnostics or predictive diagnostics, right? Whether the person is vulnerable to a particular disease or not, whether he or she is prone to a particular disease. For example, we have IBM Watson Health, which is being used in the oncology, in the cancer research, right? Then we have Google DeepMind's AI, which is trying to find out if there are any issues with respect to the retina in the eye, right? Then we have finance. In the finance, what you'll have to understand is that AI is now being used to detect the frauds which can take place at any of the places in the supply chain with respect to the finance, or to assess the risk. What is the risk? And it is also being used, for example, in the stock trading, right? Algorithms are used. PayPal is doing with respect to the threat detection. Then we have in education. In education, see, we have different people, different children, and all of them have their own needs. All of them have their own grasping power. So what is really important is to come up with the personalized learning. And with respect to that, we have Duolingo. We have, for example, the automated evaluation. You must have seen this, the automated evaluation of answers or something. So we have Gradescope. Then we have the transportation. We have the autonomous travel, autonomous driving, which takes place, right? More accurate, more with precision, right? That is, Tesla is using the autopilot system, or we have Google, which is using in the maps, right? Then we have retail and e-commerce. Over here, what you'll have to understand is two things. First is with respect to that enterprise itself. Let's say Amazon or Flipkart. They are using the AI so as to come up or optimize their supply chains, so as to make their systems more efficient. Okay? So maintenance or management of the supply chain is one area. Second is with respect to, let's say you open the Amazon and you have that particular content or you have that particular choices. Let's say you are opening the Netflix or anything, Amazon. It gives you that content which you are more likely to watch or which you are more likely to buy, maybe on Myntra. That is on the basis of the preferences. It recommends the preferences, right? On the basis of your preferences, it recommends the products or services. That is what is also on the basis of the AI. Then we have in manufacturing, we have some of the largest manufacturers around the world. For example, Siemens. For example, Foxconn. Foxconn is the largest electronic manufacturer in the world. Siemens is using in predictive maintenance. Ki bhai, before any error occurs in the supply chain or in any machine, the system would itself tell that please repair this part of the machine. There is a possibility that there can be a loophole or there can be a malfunctioning in this particular component, right? Then we have Foxconn, it's using AI in the supply chain management. Then we have agriculture to come up with better precision agriculture. For example, with respect to the crop yields, estimating the crop yields. Let's say with respect to the weather patterns, how the yield would be in the coming seasons, right? So it is doing a predictive analysis, or also in cases of precision agriculture, that how much amount of the water would be best for the soil, how much amount of the water would be best water or fertilizer for that particular crop, right? Then we have the entertainment. It's, almost 80% of the content which is watched on Amazon Prime and Netflix, it's primarily based on the AI recommendations which you have, right? The kind of recommended things which is done by these apps. Then we have cybersecurity. For example, in cases of detecting a particular cyber threat, giving the information to that particular person, prior information to that particular person, that please make sure that you secure your account, two-factor authentication, right? So in all these things, to create a firewall, to protect that particular person from any threat from outside, we have the usage of AI. So it has almost omnipresent application, right? Next, we have the India AI mission. Ab zahir si baat hai, it's very obvious that if AI is so important, obviously the government would take certain action. And the government has taken action. It came up with this India AI mission, very, very important component, especially from the perspective of prelims. The very objective is to establish a robust AI computing infrastructure. See, what you'll have to understand, that as I talked about the large language models, very important, please pay attention. We have these LLMs. Now, most of these LLMs, the kind of language which is used, either it is English or it's Korean or Japanese, those languages which are quite, in usage around the world. But when we talk about indigenous LLMs, there are very few. We are still developing that. First of all, we have so many languages in the country, right? And the data is there in different varied language. So we don't have a large language model. We are still working on that, which can basically be in line with the diversity of languages which we have. And that's one of the very biggest challenges which we are facing with respect to the development of AI. Okay? So the very objective of India AI mission is to develop the indigenous large language model, which is well suited to India's needs. That is what you'll have to understand. Enhance data quality. Because data, as I told, it forms a very core. The better the data would be, the large set of data, if you have, the better and the larger set of data you have, the better return or the better outcome the machine would give, right? And develop the indigenous AI technologies. The cabinet, the Union Cabinet, it basically came up with this particular mission in March 2024 with a total corpus of almost more than 10,000 crores. Initially, it said that we are going to provide more than 10,000 GPUs. Now we'll discuss what these GPUs are all about. But if you read the article, what you will see is that since that time, and it's really commendable, since that time, the government has already provided more than 36,000 of GPUs. अब देखिए GPUs होता क्या है? In simple terms, they are high processing data analytics unit. Whatever data you are feeding in the machine, its analysis is done at a very fast pace by these GPUs, graphic processing units. We have very few countries in the world who manufacture these GPUs. Very few countries and very few companies in these countries who manufacture the GPUs. And they are prohibitively costly, right? If I give you the example with respect to the GPUs, you must have heard about a company known as NVIDIA, right? Now, NVIDIA has different types of chips. It manufactures different types of GPUs, which are basically used. Let's say, if I give you the example, the very first is A100 chip. Now, it comes in the category of Ampere chips, A100 chips, and it is used in the training of large language models. So once you are preparing that large language model, in the training of that large language model, we have the usage of A100. Then we have the Hopper series of the NVIDIA H200, right? It is again used for advanced training in the large language models, right? Prohibitively expensive, we'll discuss that. Now, what the government is saying is, since these startups in the country, in India, who are working in the domain of AI, who are basically working with respect to the development of large language models, since they are not capable of buying or procuring these GPUs, we will do on their behalf. We will get them the GPUs. We'll have a facility where they can use, right? They can use the GPUs and then develop their large language models. So again, the very core component, the core hardware with respect to the development of large language model is the GPUs, and government is providing these GPUs through the India AI mission. I hope it is clear. Okay. Computational capacity of more than, right now it has reached to almost 30,000 GPUs, 36,000 GPUs. GPUs, they are critical for the training and building of large scale AI models, what we call as large language models. Okay. GPUs procurement to the Indian startups, which is essential for the overall computational capacity, right? And this is what the objective of India AI mission is. And in the article also, it mentions that we have, for example, startups like Sarvam AI or the other startups. Now, they are using these GPUs, which are, in a way, are subsidized by the government. Okay. Now, what are the other components of the India AI mission? For example, the startup financing with respect to that. Like, what are the alternatives available with respect to the financing of these startups? Because understand, development of LLMs, development of AI products and services is not something which is an easy task. It's a very capital intensive thing and it requires a lot of finances, right? Then we have innovation centers. Why? So as to know that what kind of products we can develop, how we can compete globally, because we have companies in the US and in China who are coming up with the top-notch products. So how we can compete with them, right? And that too, which can suit India's reality. Data sets platform, how we can enhance the quality of the data, very important component, and how we can have the data in that machine readable format. By machine ko padhna bhi aana chahiye na, the machine should be able to read the data, right? Then safe and trusted AI. How we can make sure that whatever AI tools or products or services we are using, it's safe, right? Application development, what all applications we can develop which suit the societal needs. Then we have computational capacity, how we can involve more private players and come up with more better services, right? How we can make sure that the costs can be distributed among the various stakeholders. Then we have future skills, how we can make sure that we can have a kind of a demography which is well tuned to the needs of the AI, how we can have a future-ready workforce, right? So all those skills which are really needed in the domain of AI are being also looked into through the India AI mission. I hope it is clear. Now, these were the good things. But what are the challenges? As Madam Professor said that it is our product, and later she was defending, and then she said that there was a communication error. See, this is not something which portrays India in a good light, right? Just because of that particular event, there have been a lot of different newspapers around the world, they have covered this particular thing. So this is something where we'll have to work upon, and we'll have to make sure that we have our own product so that we can proudly claim. We can claim we have already developed the robodogs. Why not? It was, the The institute, that particular institute could have easily gone with that particular indigenous robodog. But let's divert from that. What are the main challenges? The very first is it threatens the job ecosystem. See, understand. We have certain repetitive and routine tasks which are involved in the supply chain. Repetitive and routine tasks. If you are basically integrating technology, if you are automating the processes, if you are integrating the artificial intelligence, what's going to happen is that it is going to render millions of people jobless. Because jo task log kar rahe the, what all tasks people were performing before, now the machine can, in fact, more efficiently, the machine can do, and it can do continuously without breaks, without lunch break, without anything. So it can render millions of people jobless, especially in a country like India, where you have labor surplus. We cannot afford. Either you upskill the people, okay, which is very difficult. See, understand. And this is what even the chief economic advisor, and I'll read it for you. Chief economic advisor said that he has cautioned the private sector against the possible over-deployment of artificial intelligence tools to the detriment of labor, saying India was a country that needed 8 million additional jobs every year. So what he's saying is that we have a labor surplus. And he has urged to the private players that don't be in a rush to incorporate these technologies. Otherwise, we'll have, where would these people go? So what you'll have to understand, 2-3 things. The very first thing is that most of the labor which we have, it works in the informal sector. In the informal sector, and what all tasks they're doing, they are primarily the low and semi-skilled workers. It is very difficult to upskill them to this level of AI proficiency. Itna aasan nahi hai na. It's not that easy to train them of how to basically work on the LLMs, or to how to even operate a computer, how to work with respect to the chat GPT or something. So it's a very big task. Next thing what you'll have to understand is, according to the McKinsey Global Institute, its research, what it says is by 2030, almost 375 million, I'm again repeating, by 2030, almost 375 million jobs would be compromised. Compromise ka matlab kya hai? What does it mean? That these 375 million people around the world, they'll have to shift, they'll have to change their jobs, because these jobs would be taken over by these technologies, the routine tasks. So this corresponds to almost 14% of the global workforce. So again, it's a very big danger what we are talking about. Displacement of routine jobs, vulnerability of the low-skilled workers because they don't have the requisite capacity or the skills to operate these computers or to work on the AI tools and machines, and job polarization. Ye bhi important concept. It's a very important concept. Let's look at this bandwidth. Let's say we have these people as low-skilled, we have highly skilled people, and we have the medium-skilled people. Right now, we have an equitable distribution. We have the low-skilled people, and then we have the medium skilled people, and then we have the highly skilled people, very few in numbers. What would happen with the incorporation of technology is that these middle skilled people, they will lose their jobs. And there would be just the polarization as low skilled workers and highly skilled workers. So this would lead to polarization in the job market, which is obviously not good, right? And this is going to deepen the inequalities in the society. Entrenched notions of inequality in the society would be developed. That is what you'll have to understand. Okay. Limited GPU capacity and infrastructure. As I told you that we have very few countries in the world who have the capacity to manufacture these GPUs first of all, and very few companies, very few enterprises in these countries, as we have NVIDIA or AMD, right, or other companies, Micron for example. We are primarily dependent on the imports as far as these GPUs are concerned. We are still in the phase of development. आपने देखा होगा, you must have heard about the semiconductors, the manufacturing of the semiconductors. We have the assembly, testing, marking, and packaging facility. These are the auxiliary tasks. These are not the main task with respect to the development of semiconductors. That is the reason in this year's budget, we have come with the India Semiconductor Mission 2.0, which talks about the full stack development of the semiconductors, not just assembly, testing, marking, and packaging. These are auxiliary tasks. Okay? So we are still dependent on these countries. Then there are issues with respect to the geopolitics. What is happening? We often, whenever we talk about Taiwan, we talk about the Silicon Shield. Why is US is always in that process of giving security guarantees to Taiwan? Not because it has any familiar, affiliation or inclination towards Taiwanese people. No, because it knows that Taiwan is one of the biggest pillars, one of the most important pillars as far as the manufacturing of semiconductors is concerned. And US is critically dependent. It has its own indigenous base also. It has its own companies who are manufacturing semiconductors. But still, it is dependent on the capacity of Taiwan. And that's the reason it is always in that process of providing the guarantees, security guarantees to Taiwan. Geopolitical issues are there. If anything happens in the South China Sea or anywhere around the world, it can have the effect on the imports of these chips to India. What happened in the COVID times? And then it would have a negative influence on the manufacturing of, for example, the electric vehicles or the battery storage systems or the renewable energy technologies, because almost each and every of these emerging technologies have a critical component of semiconductors. I hope it is clear because they're all linked in one line. Low availability and high costs. High costs, if I give you the example, I talked about the A100 chip. A single A100 chip of NVIDIA, it costs almost 8 to 12 lakh Indian rupees. And the H200 chip, H200, it costs almost around from 25 lakhs to 30 lakhs. Just one chip. Can you imagine? Prohibitively expensive. Okay? Then we have data access and quality. Whatever data sets, first of all, what you'll have to understand is we don't have the adequate number of data sets. Most of the data sets, they are in different vernacular languages. And machine are not capable to identify and read that particular language. Because most of the machines are proficient with respect to the English or other language. So we'll have to make sure that we develop those LLMs which can identify or read the Indian vernacular languages. For example, we have the scheduled languages. Tell me how many scheduled languages we have. Next thing is that whatever data we have, it is not properly catalogued. There is no marking of the data. We don't have good quality data. If you don't have good quality data, you will not have good quality outcome through the AI machines. That's one of the very biggest things which you'll have to understand, right? Loopholes. Current data sets, they are inadequate with respect to the development of indigenous AI models. Bhai, if you have to create an AI product which can understand a particular prompt given in Malayalam, you need to have data sets on which the machine has already been trained, the Malayalam data sets or Tamil or Kannada or any other language, but that we don't have. Next, we have the limited AI expertise and high cost. We have a shortage. First of all, we have very limited number of colleges who are offering courses, and that too, top courses with respect to the AI. Those courses which are not just based on theoretical basis, but also the pragmatic aspect, practical implementation. We have very few colleges. And what all people who graduate from those colleges, most of them, they migrate to other countries. Why? Because they get a very good incentive over there. They get a very good compensation in terms of money. So we have, first of all, limited shortage labor pool. And then most of them, they migrate. Brain drain is taking place. So we'll have to focus on that. We'll have to make sure that we give proper incentive to them. We'll talk on the way forward. High implementation costs. Let's say if a particular enterprise in India, if a company in India is thinking to integrate technology or AI in its process, is it something which is a very easy task? No, it would require a lot of money, capital intensive. And in a country like India, where we have a lot of these MSMEs who are always starved of funds, they don't have the enough amount of money, even the working capital. How can we basically make sure that we make them competitive, and not just domestically but internationally? Bhai, agar aapko apne enterprises ko, if you have to make your enterprises competitive as what other enterprises are doing in China, you'll have to integrate technology, but that is not an easy task, right? It requires a lot of money. Then infrastructure deficiencies. We are deficit when we talk with respect to the advanced cloud computing infrastructure, the data centers, right? Data centers, again, you need to have strong, robust cloud computing capacity. You need to have big data centers. We don't have. We have, but they're very limited. We have, for example, Airavat, the India's platform with respect to the cloud computing system. But again, it's not sufficient. We'll have to work, and this is again very intensive, capital intensive. Setting up data centers is something which is very capital intensive. Ethical and integrity concerns. Whatever data sets we have in the society, what you'll have to understand, even if we have requisite or good quality data sets, what you'll have to understand is there are stereotypes which are involved. There are biases in the data sets. When you'll have biases in the data sets or the stereotypes with respect to the data sets, do you think the machine would give a right response? The response would also be biased. And that is what we talk about, that whatever response the machines give right now, it is not something, it never gives a response which is one-sided. If you'll ask a question, just try it to ChatGPT, it would give you both these options. hardly it would give you one-sided opinion, right? So this is something which have to be considered. Sensitive and personal data, privacy issues are also involved. We have right to privacy, which is a fundamental right under Article 21, right? Then we have geopolitical and regulatory issues, restrict access to essential AI technologies. Most of the countries like US and China, they have created a shield, they have created a wall, and they don't want other countries to access those technologies, highly intensive or highly technological, those platforms. They don't want, and why would they want? Obviously. So this again creates a kind of a barrier for countries like India, right? Then we have environmental concerns. These machines, they consume significant energy. And according to a research done by the International Energy Agency, it said that in the year 2024, the data centers consumed almost 1.3% of the global electricity which was produced. And this number is, it would go to almost 3 to 4% in 2026-27. Just imagine, almost 3 to 4% of the global consumption of electricity is because of these data centers. So we'll have to make sure that we go for more renewable sources, right? Now, what should be the way forward? The very first is we need to incentivize the hardware manufacturing. Whatever hardware is needed, for example, in terms of GPUs, in the form of printed circuit boards, in the form of the hardware which is used in the data centers, we already have schemes like the production linked incentives, but we need to expand the PLI schemes to all these things, different components, specific components, so that we can have the indigenous manufacturing of these components, right? Then we have, and this would obviously stimulate the growth in the AI domain. Then we have the startup support. We have small startups in the country which have a great talent. There's no dearth of talent, but they don't have the adequate finances. They don't have the hand-holding support. They don't have the access to the GPUs. So we need to make sure that we give due emphasis to the accelerators, to the incubators, in order to make sure that these startups can access the finances, can access the technology, and then come out with better results, right? Mentorship. For example, we have T-Hub in Telangana. Then comprehensive data ecosystem. Why not we create a national data platform, a centralized repository where all the data is accumulated, and that too in machine readable format. That data can then be accessed by these platforms which are basically working, which are trying to create the large language models, indigenous large language models. So that would be again something which would facilitate the development of AI indigenous models. And in the standardized format and quality checks. Encryption, you have the encryption, for example, in the WhatsApp or Telegram, and data labeling, very important. You have a catalog of data, that this data pertains to agriculture, this data pertains to social sector, this data pertains to the space domain. So that the machine, it would be easier for the machine to basically do the research part. Then we have prioritize the ethical AI, very, very important component. Comprehensive ethical AI guidelines. You must be aware of the GPA, Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, which talks about having an ethical framework with respect to the AI. Very, very important, because if you'll have biases with respect to the data, the machine is not going to give you a right response. Definitely there would be biases involved, right? We can have the mandatory security audits, mandatory ethical audits with respect to the algorithms you are creating, whether the algorithms are ethical or not, whether there are biases involved or not, right? And regular AI audits. Then AI applications should be in line with the societal needs. See, we have India, and India has its own needs. We have a lot of poverty, we have malnutrition, we have hunger, we have illiteracy. Why not come up with those AI products which can alleviate people, which can alleviate poverty, which can basically strike at the very root of these social issues, right? And give the benefits. So we need to have development of those applications which are suited to the India's needs, right? Identify the societal challenges and develop AI-driven solutions and ensure equitable access to AI benefits. Yeah, and that is where the job polarization also matters. Because if people don't have the knowledge with respect to the usage of AI, they'll not be able to use or optimize or get the return of the AI benefits. So there has to be equitable distribution of AI benefits also. Promote sustainable AI. Investing in energy efficient AI algorithms. We have right now Mr. Trump, President of the US. What he's doing is he's now saying that we are going to exploit the fossil fuels in order to create big data centers against the principles of the nature conservation. So we'll have to make sure that we come up with more renewable energy sources, and those sources can be used for these data centers, right? Green energy. Renewable energy sources for data centers, talent gap. we need to make sure that what all people who are graduating and who have, be it the AI engineers or the researchers, AI researchers, they are retained in India. By how? How you will retain them? By giving them better incentives, better compensation, better environment, better support, hand-holding support. And the starting can be made from the internship, research projects, faculty exchange with respect to China or with respect to the US, incentives and is very important. The very core is you offer them the better salaries and compensation. Otherwise, why would they go to US? Right? Environment is also better over there. Environment in terms of the access to finances, the access to the technology. So why, if US can do that, definitely we can also do that. At least we can try. So understand that AI is the frontier of technology. And we'll have to significantly invest in different aspects, what all things we have discussed, not just in one particular domain. Because if we fail to do so right now, then we are going to lag behind and we will just be a participant applauding for others, right? And then again, defending ourselves by saying that your 6 can be my 9, right? So that should not be done. We should rather invest intensively in this particular domain, making sure that what all energy sources we are using, they are renewable, they are clean sources, and so that we can have a more cleaner and sustainable development of artificial intelligence. That is what you'll have to understand. Let's have a mains practice question. Artificial intelligence offers immense potential for India's growth, but it also brings significant challenges. We've discussed the various challenges, discuss the challenges posed by the AI adoption in India, and suggest a way forward to harness its benefits while minimizing its adverse impact. Very important topic. Do write the answer. And yes, if you're liking the initiative, do not forget to press the like button and also let us know in the comments. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have the carbon capture and utilization. See, what you'll have to understand is India is now emerging as one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide. And this is very understandable because right now we are witnessing our developmental trajectories. We are focusing upon the industrial expansion. We are focusing upon transportation. We are focusing on different sectors. So it's natural that we would have the emissions of greenhouse gases, including the carbon dioxide. But since India is a responsible country and we believe in the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, it becomes all the more important for India, for a country like India, to significantly invest in mitigating these crises, mitigating these issues, the ill effects of climate change. And we have one of the very important technologies known as carbon capture, utilization and storage. Let me first tell you about this. Let's say we have a particular industry which is emitting carbon dioxide, right? It's emitting carbon dioxide. Now what you do is you capture that particular CO2. You capture through various technologies, you capture it and then you transport. Now you have two options. Either you store it for perpetuity, for permanence, right, in the underground, the places which you have, right, or the mines which you have. Or what you can do is you can utilize it. How you can utilize it? By converting that CO2 into that particular product which is usable. It can be a biological product, it can be a chemical product, it can be a fuel, it can be anything, but which can be made a part of supply chain, which can be a feedstock, which can be used. That is how you basically make the process more environmental, right? That is how you make the whole process more sustainable. And that is where this particular technology is very, very important. But what you'll have to understand is that most of the work which is actually being done in India with respect to CCUS, it's at a pilot level. It's not scaled up to that commercial level. But we have countries in the EU, we have United States, we have countries like UAE, who have already started the commercial application of these technologies. And that is the reason that we often emphasize that there has to be adequate transfer with respect to technology, with respect to the finances to the developing countries by the developed countries, starting from the very first Kyoto Protocol and then to the Paris Agreement. We have been consistently emphasizing on this particular part. So I hope it is clear, right? So what the article says is that capturing, purifying and converting CO2 is energy intensive and expensive process. And we'll talk about the challenges and the way forward. Very important component of GS3. Again, what is carbon capture and utilization? It refers to the technologies that capture the carbon dioxide emissions from the industrial sources. Let's say you have a cement manufacturing plant. Let's say you have a polymer manufacturing plant, right? And it is basically emitting a lot of CO2. So you capture it, or directly from the atmosphere. Through the use of scrubbers or something, you directly capture the CO2 from the atmosphere and convert the captured CO2, because right now you're focusing on utilization of that captured CO2 into useful products. For example, we have fuels. let's say you capture the CO2 and now you produce, for example, methanol, or you produce syngas, right, or methanol. Or what you can do is you can produce different chemicals in the form of olefins, ethylene, right? Or you can manufacture different products, building materials in the form of concrete blocks, right, which can be used in the construction, or you can produce polymers in the form of styrene, for example. So there can be the conversion. Definitely you need processes for that, and that's the reason it is quite intensive process, technologically intensive process. You need adequate technology for it. But again, this is a more sustainable way of utilizing the CO2 which you have emitted in the atmosphere. And there is a difference which you can just learn from this infographic. We have the capture, separate the CO2 from the exhaust gas and refine and capture. Then we have the utilization, use CO2 as a material in products. For example, you can have this polymers, you can have different materials, fuels, and storage. Store captured CO2 underground and offshore for perpetuity, right? Then we have CCU versus carbon capture storage. CCU, it reuses the captured CO2 in economic processes. Reuses means what? That you are utilizing the CO2 and you are converting it into a particular product and then you're reusing it. And storage, it just permanently stores CO2 underground without the reuse. Thus, CCU, utilization, carbon capture utilization, contributes to a circular carbon economy. And circularity in the economy is something which is now an indispensable part. You will have to do it, right? Whereas CCS primarily focus on the emission containment. Now, why does India need CCU? Look at this. First of all, what you'll have to understand is we are the third largest CO2 emitter, right? We have not emitted to the level what these countries have done, US and other European countries, and they don't even, share the responsibility. That's the saddest part. And we have, people like Trump who say that climate change is a hoax, right? It's not a reality. But again, let's come to this part. We are now one of the largest emitters and we are a responsible country. So therefore, we'll have to contain the emissions of carbon dioxide and also make sure that this is used efficiently, right? For example, look at this. This I've taken from the India Today group. It says biggest sources of CO2 emissions in India. It talks about electricity, gas supply, then we have metal products, then we have water transport, we have mining, quarrying, air transport. So you can just have a look. These are the various sources, varied sources of production. Major emitting sources are power generation, cement, steel, chemicals, all these sectors. And there are limitations also imposed on these sectors that they should reduce their overall emissions, right? Tell me the name of that particular scheme. Let me give you the hint. It's perform, achieve, trade, right? Also, if you can, please write maybe 1 or 2 lines with respect to the perform, achieve, trade scheme, right? Many of these hard to abate sectors because these are energy intensive sectors. They would require a lot of feedstock and therefore naturally they would produce a lot of CO2. So it's very important that these emissions are captured and then utilized again. Strategic importance, if we have CCU, if we have proper technology with respect to CCU, it would help India reduce to the emissions with respect to the carbon intensive industries. We have our nationally determined contributions, right? So we have set certain targets. Prime Minister Modi in Glasgow also talked about the Panch Amrit goals. So definitely it would help to realize those objectives, create new green industrial value chains, make overall product more sustainable, right? It would lead to more efficiency in the overall production. Then we have supports the net zero by 2070 commitment, promote a circular low carbon economy. Make sure that we follow a more greener form of economic model, right? Thus, CCU is both environmental and industrial policy tool. Current initiatives, if we talk about, the very first is government. We have Department of Science and Technology, and we have also the roadmap which is prepared by the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, which we call as Draft 2030 CCUS roadmap. So we have ministries taking up the lead, but what you'll have to understand is right now they are primarily doing the research work. They're coming up with the white papers with respect to the CCUS. It's not completely converted into reality, not materialized as such. Then we have the private sector initiatives in terms of Ambuja Cement, Adani Group, part of the Adani Group, which Indo-Swedish CCU pilot project with IIT Bombay has been carried out, where they are basically trying to develop that how we can manufacture a fuels with the help of the captured carbon dioxide. Then we have the JK Cement developing a CCU testbed of how to come up with the concrete blocks which can be used in the construction. Then we have Organic Recycling Systems Limited, India's first pilot scale bio CCU platform. Again, focusing upon creating, coming up with those fuels or olefins, right? Production of olefins. And it is because of that in this year's budget, the government has basically given a quite good amount of importance to this particular thing. Budget 2026-27 sets aside almost 20,000 crores to accelerate the carbon capture in the heavy industries. Very important component. Global development, we have, for example, EU, we have US, we have UAE. Now, what they have done is they've already developed the technology, and now they are commercially applying the technology. They have scaled up to that commercial level. EU Bioeconomy Strategy and Circular Economy Action Plan to promote the CCU. In US, it uses the tax credits and funding incentives to promote the usage of the CCU, to integrate it in the supply chains, in the overall manufacturing processes. UAE, Al Riyadh project integrates CCU with green hydrogen. Again, so as to have a better feedstock, a cleaner feedstock for the energy usage, right? What are the key risks and challenges for India? The very first is cost competitiveness. Again, understand carbon capture and conversion is something which is both energy intensive and capital intensive. And as I told in the very first discussion, that we have most of the industries in India who don't have adequate capital with them, who don't have adequate technology. They are facing technological obsolescence. They're not that ready with respect to the technology. So how can you expect that readiness? Very difficult. Without carbon pricing, without tax incentives, without green subsidies, it's not really possible for different enterprises to incorporate the technology with respect to CCUS. CCU product may not compete with the fossil-based alternative because they are easily available and the cost with respect to that is even much lower, right? So that is what you have to understand. Infrastructure constraints. CC requires industrial clustering. Because see, if you'll have the carbon capture, it requires industries to be placed together so that the carbon can be captured easily, right? CO2 transport systems and integrated downstream manufacturing. What all CO2 you have got? How would you use that to manufacture different products, right? India's industrial ecosystems are unevenly developed, limiting the scalability. So it's not really easy to scale to that commercial level. These countries have done, the countries in the EU or the US, but for us, it's quite difficult. Regulatory and market uncertainty, no clear standards or certification framework. As I told you, that we are still at the research stage. We have just come with the white papers. We have not developed the adequate standards with respect to the technology. So how can we have the commercial application? Lack of demand signals, uncertain policy environment. Because for India, again, we are developing at a very fast pace. And these things require a lot of energy and time and resources. So it's very difficult for a country like India, but still we are doing it. And we should do it. That is what you'll have to understand. This discourages a private investment. What should be the way forward? For CCU to succeed in India, we need a clear regulatory framework by both Ministry of Environment, also by Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, and also other ministries concerned. And certification standards. Then carbon pricing or incentive-based support, so that the players have a better incentive to participate in the overall project. Industrial cluster development, public-private partnership. Government cannot do everything. There has to be integration of the private players also. Integration with green hydrogen and renewable energy, so that we have a more cleaner form of energy. And that is where CCUS becomes very, very important. There is a very high probability of this particular thing coming in the prelims or in the mains, because it has been a very important component of budget this year. So I hope it is clear. Let's have a very small question and try to write this particular answer. Explain the concept of CCUS and highlight the major challenges in scaling CCUS. Also suggest a robust way forward. 10 marks, 150 words. Do write a particular answer for this question. Right? Let's go to the next section. Coming to the prelims pointer section, we have the very first topic which talks about the Chagos Deal. See, in geography, we have the nomenclature of archipelago, which means a group of islands. In the Indian Ocean, we have a group of islands known as the Chagos Archipelago. Now, Chagos Archipelago is occupied by Britishers since the time it was colonized by them. Recently, there was an agreement which was reached between the Britishers and the Mauritius government that there would be the transfer of sovereignty of the Chagos Archipelago to the Mauritius government, Mauritius people, except the atoll or the island of Diego Garcia. For that, there is a kind of 99 years lease in the agreement which has been mentioned. Why? Because Diego Garcia is an atoll, is an island which houses the US-UK naval base in the Indian Ocean, and it's of a very strategic importance for both these countries, especially the US. Now, what has happened is US has intervened in this part, and it is basically asking the UK not to conclude this particular agreement, right? And therefore, this becomes important can be asked in the prelims. A bill operationalizing the UK-Mauritius Treaty, which recognizes the sovereignty of Mauritius over the Chagos Archipelago, is currently on hold in the British Parliament while London holds discussions with Washington. The Indian Ocean Islands are home to Diego Garcia, which houses a joint UK-US military base. The treaty signed in May 2025 would transfer the sovereignty over the archipelago to Mauritius, while the UK would be given a 99-year lease for Diego Garcia and pay Mauritius an average annual amount of Great Britain pounds 101 million annual amount. The US President Donald Trump, who earlier backed the treaty, changed his position and publicly called for its consideration because he is fickle-minded, and he then said that it can have effect on US interests because you have the US base over there. Mr. Trump said Diego Garcia should not be given away and suggested that it may be needed in the event US strike on Iran, right? So again, of very strategic importance for the US. Now, this is what you can just understand. We have India and this is the Indian Ocean. Over here, we have the Chagos Archipelago, right? And the sovereignty, according to the agreement, would be transferred back to the Mauritius, except the atoll of Diego Garcia, which has been taken for a lease of 99 years. Chagos Archipelago Island Group in the central Indian Ocean, located about 1,600 kilometers south of the southern tip of Indian subcontinent, has been co-terminus with the British Indian Ocean Territory, BIOT, right? Because it has been occupied by the Britishers. Lying at the center of the Indian Ocean and out of the path of cyclonic storms, the archipelago is strategically located. It constitutes a semicircular group open to east, comprising Solomon Islands and the other islands. This is important. Diego Garcia Atoll, the largest square miles and southernmost landmass in the group, and the location of a major UK-US military base. History, you can also just go through this. It is basically administered through the Foreign Office, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in London. Although there is no permanent civilian population on the islands, generally about 4,000 US and British military and contract civilian personnel are stationed there. The islands, which were uninhabited when they were discovered by the Portuguese explorer in 16th century, were situated on the international trade routes and became the focus of competing claims by European powers. In the 18th century, the France took possessions of the Chagos Archipelago and Seychelles as dependencies of Mauritius, and coconut plantations were established to produce copra. Slaves were imported from Africa to work in the plantations. In the early 19th century, the British took over the islands. Mauritius and its dependencies were officially proclaimed a colony of Britain in 1814 under the Treaty of Paris. Seychelles was later detached from the Mauritius and became a separate colony of the Britain in 1903. During the Cold War, agreement between the governments of the Britain and the United States led to the creation of 1965 British Indian Ocean Territory for the purpose of establishing defense and communications facilities to counterbalance the Soviet military presence. So primarily it was to counter the Soviet expansion, right? The new territory comprised the Aldabara Islands and the other islands, formerly part of the Seychelles colony, along with the Chagos Archipelago, which had formerly been part of the Mauritius colony. A major UK-US military facility was built on Diego Garcia in 1971, and the plantations were there closed, right? So that is what you'll have to understand. There was a kind of a forceful evacuation of people, and it was then taken for the creation of, for the establishment of military base. Expansion of the military facilities during the 1970s and 80s was opposed by the neighboring states, who viewed the base as compromising the non-militarized status of the Indian Ocean region. Numerous airstrikes were launched from the Diego Garcia during the Persian Gulf War, and the US led attacks on Afghanistan and the initial phase of the Iraq War. You can just see, we have Chagos Archipelago and then we have Diego Garcia. I think this would be better for the understanding part. We have sovereignty status and the treaty developments. Discussion about the legality of the British government's action in the 1960s and 70s regarding the Chagos Archipelago rose to the fore again when the United Nations General Assembly formally requested in 2017 that UN's judicial organ, the ICJ, International Court of Justice, tell me the headquarters of ICJ, where they are located, render an advisory opinion on whether the decolonization of Mauritius with regard to the Chagos Archipelago had been lawfully completed and on what consequences under the international law of British rule over the Chagos Archipelago were. During the proceedings, the Mauritius stated that it had been forced to give up the islands of the Chagos Archipelago in exchange for its independence in 1968. The ICJ's ruling, which came in February 2019, found that the decolonization process had been illegal, and the recommendations that the UK and its administration of the Chagos Archipelago as soon as possible, which would open the way for the return of islands to Mauritius. As it was an advisory ruling, it was non-binding, although it did carry a significant international weight. A tentative agreement, which we concluded in which Britishers and Mauritius concluded in May 2025, to resolve the dispute were announced in October 2024, and a final treaty transfer sovereignty to Mauritius was signed in May 2025. But again, now US has intervened primarily to protect its interests in the Diego Garcia. The treaty still awaits primary and secondary legislation before entering into force. This is a map which is again can be read. We have the Great Chagos Bank and we have the Chagos Archipelago. There's numerous islands over here, and this is Diego Garcia of strategic importance, part of the Chagos Archipelago. This is what you need to understand with respect to this particular article. Let's go to the next one. Coming to the next topic, we have the sighting of the Eurasian diving duck in the Kaziranga National Park, and it has again been sighted, but the reason which has been attributed is quite concerning. Let's go through this. The 7th water bird count at the Kaziranga National Park and the Tiger Reserve in Assam, released on Wednesday, has spotlighted a new avian guest, a diving duck from the Eurasian tiger breeding grounds. However, the cheer for ornithologists, those people who study the birds, and wildlife officials has come with some concern related to the climate change. The SMEW signals wetland health in India, but its vagrant status. Ideally, it's a kind of a Eurasian bird, and its presence has been seen over here. So this points towards the ill effects of climate change. Climate-driven range shifts and the need to protect refueling stops amid hunting and oil pollution threats. A striking diving duck, and that is how the species-related question come in the prelims, and very beautifully mentioned in the Hindu. Please make sure that you go through this, can be asked in the prelims. A striking diving duck, the SMEW, is a rare visitor to India. Sightings are sporadic and localized mainly in the northern or the central Indian wetlands, including the Hyderpur in Uttar Pradesh. So it has been sighted in the wetland of Hyderpur in Uttar Pradesh also. The Kaziranga landscape, let's talk about Kaziranga, covering almost 1,300 square kilometers, and in the core areas of the park are better known for its one-horned rhinoceros. The diving duck favors fish-rich, sheltered waters during winters, singly or in a small flock. Globally, there are an estimated 130,000 SMEWs, but their number has been declining due to habitat loss and human activities. We have two important bird areas, IBAs. We'll discuss what these IBAs are all about in Kaziranga landscape. The Kaziranga National Park and two wildlife sanctuaries, the Laokova and Burha Chapori. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. That is what you'll have to understand. Let's talk about the Kaziranga National Park, situated between Brahmaputra River and the Karbi Hills in Assam. Its single largest undisturbed and representative area in the Brahmaputra Valley floodplain. In 1985, the park was declared as a World Heritage Site by the UNESCO. Terrain, it's a sheer forest, tall elephant grass, rugged reeds, marshes and shallow pools. The river Difalu, a tributary of Brahmaputra, flows through the national park, with another tributary, Mora di Falu, right? Sorry for the pronunciation if it's wrong, flows along the southern boundary. Flora, it primarily is famous for its dense and tall elephant grasses, intermixed. Please make sure that you are clear with the kind of ecology it has, the place, because many times what we have seen is question comes in the form of a description and then it asks which of the national park has the similar attributes or the same attributes, right? It also includes abundant cover of water lilies, water hyacinths, and lotus. Fauna, it is home to the species like rhino, tiger, eastern swan deer, elephant, buffalo, hollow gibbon, capped langur. The Gangetic river dolphin is commonly found in the habitat. It is inhabited by the world's largest population of one-horned rhinoceroses as well as many mammals. And this is a place where it is located. We have Manas National Park, Orang, Nameri, we have Kaziranga over here, Dibru Saikova over here, right? So they're straight away lined up in Assam. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have the CAFE 3 norms with respect to the vehicles. So the Prime Minister office held a meeting on Wednesday to review the proposed carbon emission norms for passenger vehicles slated to take effect from 2027, though no final decision was reached. Let's see what this CAFE 3 norms are all about. India plans to implement the third phase of corporate average fuel efficiency. Can be important for the prelims. Norms from financial year 2028 till 2032 to improve the fuel efficiency and reduce carbon emissions from the passenger vehicles. However, the weight-based structure of the new norms has triggered significant disagreement within the auto industry, especially between the manufacturers of small cars and those with a portfolio dominated by heavier SUVs. Because in the formula, with respect to the calculating the efficiency, the fuel which must be capped, we have the weight of the vehicle which is included, and because of that there are significant variation in the output. What are CAFE norms? CAFE norms regulate the average fuel consumption and CO2 emissions across a manufacturer's fleet. It proposes a movement from the current modified Indian driving cycle to the worldwide harmonized light vehicles test procedure, which the European Union adopted in 2018. India follows a weight-based formula that becomes progressively stricter each year, right? So it introduces, CAFE 3 introduces a new weight-based efficiency formula of this. No need to memorize this, just understand. Here, W is a average weight fleet. 1,170 kg is a fixed constant for the weight, and 0.002 is a fixed constant multiplier, and other things. Now, what are the issues? What you'll have to understand. Why is the industry divided? Impact of weight-based formula: lighter cars face steeper efficiency improvements than heavier ones. So this is an issue. For example, a 740 car needs to become 48% more efficient by financial year 2032. A 2,500 kg SUV needs only 25% improvement despite higher absolute emissions. Result: greater regulatory burden on small budget cars. Small car manufacturers' concerns: disproportionate impact. Small cars operate on low margins and cannot easily absorb the cost of hybrid systems, electrification, lightweighting technologies. Consumers may be priced out. Stricter norms may raise the cost of entry-level cars, could discourage the first-time buyers. Distortion of CAFE's original intent. Maruti Suzuki argues that CAFE was meant to push big cars to improve the fuel efficiency, but invariably what has happened is that the burden has fallen on the small cars. And it is basically the low middle class or the lower middle class which goes for the small cars. So there would be an undue burden on this particular segment of society. Why some car makers support CAFE 3? We have Tata Motors stance, claims no concerns in achieving the norms, rejects weight-based definitions of small cars as arbitrary, potentially compromising safety standards. Others, Mahindra and Tata, oppose higher exemptions for lighter cars. So you just need to understand, there can be a question that what CAFE 3 norms, in which domain they apply. So it's with respect to the passenger vehicles, right? Let's go to the next topic. Come to the next topic, we have a mention of the State Election Commission's ECI, Election Commission of India, is now thinking to streamline its processes, along with the usage of ECI in it, with the state election commissions. The Election Commission has proposed to work out a mutually acceptable mechanism and legally viable framework with all state election commissions across the country to synergize election-related processes, including the sharing of EVM, electronic voting machines, electoral rolls, and the ECI Net digital platform. Let's talk about the State Election Commissions, the constitutional provisions, and the background. The State Election Commission is a constitutional body established to ensure free and fair elections to the local self-government institutions, the Panchayati Raj institutions, the urban local bodies. Its constitutional basis is provided under Part 9 and Part 9A of the Indian Constitution, which empower the State Election Commission to conduct elections to the panchayats and municipalities. We have Article 243K, Part 9, State Election Commission for Panchayats, vests the superintendence, direction and control and preparation of the electoral rolls and the conduct of panchayat elections to the State Election Commissions. Article 243ZA, Part 9A, Municipalities. State Election Commission for Municipalities empowers the SEC to supervise electoral rolls and conduct the elections to the municipal bodies. 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, Part 9, Rural Local Self-Government, gave constitutional status to panchayats and provided for the State Election Commission. Then we have the 74th Amendment, again talked about the municipalities, urban local bodies, right, Part 9A. Then we have governor's role, Article 243K and 243ZA. Appointment and service conditions. Governor appoints the State Election Commissioner and determines service conditions subject to state law. Okay. Then we have removal safeguard, Article 243 capital K. Independence of SEC. State Election Commissioner can be removed only in the same manner and on the same grounds as that of the High Court judge. Please remember, this can be asked, right? High Court judge. Then we have state legislature power, Article 243K subclause 4 and 243ZA subclause 2. Lawmaking power, state legislature may make laws relating to the local body elections subject to the Constitution. State Election Commission composition. The State Election Commission is generally headed by the State Election Commissioner, assisted by such officers and staff as provided under the laws of the respective states. So it's the state which determine the number of the other officers who are a part of the State Election Commission. The structure and size of the commission vary from state to state, but it functions as an independent constitutional authority for the local body elections, right? Next is the commission appointment and removal. The State Election Commissioner is appointed by the governor of the state as provided in Article 243K and 243ZA. The conditions of service, tenure, and qualifications of the commissioner are prescribed by the state laws, ensuring a formal and legal appointment process appointed by the governor. Service conditions and tenure decided by the state law cannot be removed. Service condition and tenure decided by the state law, okay, not the parliament. Cannot be removed except and in the same manner and on the same grounds as that of the High Court judge. Very important, keep this in mind. Service conditions cannot be changed to the disadvantage of the commissioner after the appointment. State Election Commissioner, powers and functions: conduct elections of the panchayats and municipal bodies, supervises the preparation, revision and updating of electoral rolls, issues election notifications, schedules and guidelines, ensures free, fair and transparent local body elections, enforces the model code of conduct during the local elections, carries out the delimitation of constituencies. At the national level, we have the delimitation commission, but with respect to the delimitation of the local bodies, the jurisdiction within which you'll have a particular person elected, that is done by the state election commission itself for the local bodies, right? Registers and deregisters political party for local body elections as per the state laws, oversees the nomination, polling, counting of votes and the declaration of result, resolves the election related issues and disputes within its jurisdiction. So please go through this. Again, factual information, there's not much of concept involved, but can be asked in the prelims, right? Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion, we have a piece of information which says that Meghalaya has the highest HIV caseload in India. Meghalaya currently has the highest human immunodeficiency virus HIV caseload in India. 10,293 people living with HIV were receiving antiretroviral treatment. 949 deaths linked to the virus have been recorded in the state over the past decade, with the East Khasi Hill district reporting almost 435 of these cases. Let's talk about the HIV/AIDS. The HIV is a virus that attacks the immune system, primarily damaging the CD4 cells known as the white blood cells, weakening the body and making it vulnerable to infections and cancers. Occurs via direct contact with the infected bodily fluids. It can be blood, semen, breast milk, vaginal fluids, like the unprotected sex, shared needles, or unsterilized tattooing. It is not spread through casual contact. Symptoms: early sign, fever and rash. Later stages may involve swollen lymph nodes, weight loss and diarrhea. Severe HIV can lead to opportunistic illnesses such as tuberculosis, meningitis, and cancers like lymphoma. There is no cure, understand. However, there is lifelong daily antiretroviral therapy, ART, right? Effectively controls the virus. Global response, Sustainable Development Goal 3.3 aims to end the HIV epidemic as a public health threat by 2030. And this is again very important, taken from the PIV. It's National AIDS Control Program Phase 5, 2021 till 2026. Reduce the annual new HIV infections by 80% from 2010 baseline. Reduce age-related mortalities by 80% from 2010 baseline. Eliminate vertical transmission of HIV and syphilis, mother to child. Promote universal access to quality STI, RTI services for at-risk and vulnerable populations. Eliminate HIV, AIDS-related stigma and discrimination. So this can be asked in the prelims. Again, important kind of virus which it is and what steps the government has taken with respect to the eradication of the disease. That's it from my side. I hope you really enjoyed the discussion. All the very best. Thank you so much.